What's up guys, today's video is about learning JavaScript in a short amount of time. So I'm not sure how long it's going to take. I'm going to start recording the video, and my goal really is just to teach you guys JavaScript in the shortest amount of time possible. It's just going to be JavaScript. We're not going to cover any of the web browser things, so like, dealing with the DOM and everything, that relates to, the web. We're just going to teach you JavaScript as the language alone, nothing about the web stuff. So let's get into it. So before we start, I just want to go through kind of what you need. So the first thing you need is you need to have Node.js installed. I would recommend the long-term support version. It's pretty simple to install. You can just go to nodejs.org and it'll show up there, and you can download it for your computer. I would also recommend having a code editor. Those are really handy. I'm using VS Code. If you do install VS Code, yours isn't going to look kind of like mine because I do have a theme on, but everything else should be the exact same. And yeah, so once you have those two things, go ahead, create a folder for where you want to keep your JavaScript file, and you can name it whatever you want. Mine's just named Learn JavaScript, and then you can go ahead and create a new file. So you can create a file by clicking on this button and typing whatever. Like, mostly it's a standard to write app dot or script.js. So there it is. Open it up, and here we go. We can get started. So actually, before we do that, I would recommend opening up a new terminal, like I am here. It's going to open up an integrated terminal, and these are very useful because we need to run our code and see our output, and that's what the terminal allows us to do. So let's just get this loaded up. Okay, there we go. So let's get started. So first thing I'm going to go through is variables. The way variables work, they're kind of the data type in, well, they're not data type, but they're kind of what store data in JavaScript. There are three types of variables. There's var variables, const variables, and lastly, let variables. Const and let were introduced in ES6, which is a new version of JavaScript. Var is kind of outdated. You can use it, but it's kind of the same as let. The difference between const and let is that const is trying to say constant. So basically, if I were to go with something like const equals, I can set it equal to a number. I can set it equal to a string, which is basically just multiple characters. Or I can set it equal to something like a Boolean, which is true or false. Now the reason, like, you would just write one, you wouldn't write both. The reason you're seeing this highlighting here is because you have to name your variables. You have to name your variables. So instead of just having const, you would have to have const my variable, or whatever you want to name this. It can literally be anything. It can be my variable, it can be name, like literally whatever. There are some rules when it comes to naming variables. You need to make sure that they have only letters in the name, no numbers. To start with, you can have numbers after, but the first letter in a variable cannot be a number. Okay, so the different data types, as I was talking about before, include numbers. Oh, I don't know what happened there. Numbers. We have strings, booleans, arrays, and technically you can also store objects, but it's really, I would just focus on these three. So what you can do is set this equal to anything. So you can set it equal to a boolean, a number, a string, whatever. There's a number, there's a string, and as you saw before, boolean. So when you set a const variable equal to something, you cannot change that value later on in your code. So if I had const name equals d, I later on in my code can't do something like this because it's a consistent variable. It can't change names, whereas let variables can change values. So this would not work. And also, just to go over, this is how you would change the value of a variable. So, if this was a let variable, like this, then this would be valid. Oh, I don't know why it's giving me an error. Oh, it's because the var up here. Yep, that should be it. Oh, it's still giving me something weird. Okay, 1 second, guys. Let's delete that. Delete that. What's the problem? I'm confused. Oh, there we go, it's gone. Okay, and then we're reducing like name equals, as I showed before, e, and this would work out. So then if I was going to try to print this out, the way you would do that is through console.log. This basically logs whatever you have to your console. So I can just write e, and then I can run this. To run any JavaScript file, all you have to do is write node and then app.js or whatever your file's name is. Run that. Here we go. We get e. Oh, I wrote console.log e. Sorry, my bad. What I was supposed to write in here is name. Name. There we go. Still e. So the way this is working is JavaScript files are read from the top to the bottom. So whatever happens in between that is taken care of. That's why we're seeing the name changed to e. So that is kind of variables. You can set variables really equal to a lot of different things. So let's say I wanted to make it equal to 2 plus 2. Well, then now it's equal to 2 plus 2. So if I were to console.log this, console.log name, and I were to run this, I would receive a, what's going on? Oh, sorry, I misspelled that. Console. There we go. So if I were to go ahead and do that, I would get 4. There we go. So yeah, variables are kind of like the very beginning of JavaScript. They have a lot of functionality, and yeah, they're great. So the next thing to really go through is if-else statements. So if-else statements is how we can kind of have logic in our code. The way they work is they take in a condition. So you can write if, and then you have a pair of parentheses. And so we'll set 2 variables here. We'll set variable number 1, and we'll set it equal to 22, and we'll set variable number 2 and set it equal to 2. And so now we'll have our if-else statement. So we have if, and then we have this pair of parentheses, and in here we have to write a condition. So if this condition is true, then certain code will run. So I can write if variable 1 is greater than variable 2, and then we have a pair of curly braces that open like this, then I want you to do whatever is inside of these curly braces. So this can be anything. I can console.log, and I can literally do anything. So I can write variable 1 is bigger than variable 2. So this is going to console.log variable 1 is bigger than variable 2 if, variable 1 is bigger than variable 2. And then we have other things that we can add on to this, so like multiple conditions. So we could do 3 different things inside of an if-else statement. We can have an if, we can have an else if, and we can just have an else. So the way an else if works is basically it's the same thing as an if. It just checks a different condition. So in this example, maybe you want to check if variable 2 is bigger than variable 1. So if variable 2 is bigger than variable 1, well, that's just autocomplete, guys. Then I want you to console.log, I want you to console.log hello. Okay, so this is basically going to go through. It's going to first figure out what the variables are, because JavaScript files are always written from the top bottom. It's going to figure out variable 1 is 22, variable 2 is 2. So it's going to go here, it's going to be like, okay, variable 1 bigger than variable 2. Okay, variable 1 is 22, variable 2 is 2. So, you know what? Variable 1 is bigger, so I have to run this code. Let's say this was 2, and this was 25. Then it would come here, it would say, okay, this condition isn't true, so I'm going to skip this and go to the next one. And then it's going to check this, and if it's true, then it'll do this. And if none of this is true, it won't do anything. But sometimes people want a very specific thing to happen when none of the conditions that's been given is true. So for that case, we have an else, which basically just means that if none of the stuff up here is true, then do this. If none of these conditions are true. So we can just write console.log, and then of course we have to have quotations because it's a string. Math is a lie. Or we can console.log, I don't know, one of the variables. So variable 1. And this would console.log the variable. So if we were to go ahead and run that code again, we will see hello, because variable 2 is bigger than variable 1. Let's say that we set both of these to like the same number, then neither is bigger than the other. So we'll run that, and we get 2 because it logged out variable 1. So another thing we can do with these if-else statements is there's a bunch of different types of ways you can write them. So in this situation I'm writing if variable 1 is bigger than variable 2. You can also do if variable 1 is bigger than or equal to, variable 2, or the other way around. Like this, whatever you want. You can also do something like double equals, like if variable 1 and variable 2 are the same value. There's also a triple equals, which is like it has to be the same type, same value, same everything essentially. It's like very specific. You can also do something like you can set it to if variable 1 is equal to variable 2, but you can add a exclamation mark, which basically means no, like the opposite of this. So if variable 1 is not equal to variable 2, then do this. So, similar things. And yeah, you can also, add this logic of is not up here, like if the opposite or variable 1 isn't equal to this. There's like a bunch of things you can do. A lot of it you can just search up and you'll find it online. But there's a lot of iterations for sure. You can also go ahead and do things like use like Boolean values. So like for example, let's say this variable 1 was true, then we could write here if variable 1 isn't true, if it's false, or if it's equal to false, then do this, or if variable 1 is equal to 3, then do this. Like there's endless possibilities. Another important thing to note is that you cannot have 1 equals inside of if statements, or really anywhere where you're doing a comparison, because 1 equals essentially means that you're looking to assign, like right here how we assign variable 2, how we assign 2, the number 2, to variable 2. That's assignment, right? We're assigning this value to this variable. But we're not trying to do that here. What we're trying to do here is check if this is equal. That's why we have to use minimum 2 equal signs. Another important thing to note is that if you were to do something like if variable 1 was equal to a string like hello, and we were like, okay, if this is true, then do this, this will come out as true. Any string is true. So that's another thing you can kind of play around with if you wanted to. Okay, so the next thing we're going to dive into is going to be functions. So functions are probably the best part of JavaScript. They take up most of JavaScript because you're always going to be playing around with them. The way a function works is pretty simple, but if you find it complicated, I totally understand. Everyone has trouble with first time around. So there are 2 types of functions. The original type of function before ES6, which I mentioned before is the new version of JavaScript, was written like this. You would write function and then the name of the function. So let's say this is like a function that we can call this function logger, because maybe we're gonna have this function log something to the console. So logger, and then we have a pair of parentheses here, and then we have a pair of curly brackets. So curly brackets, curly braces, whatever you want to call them. And here is where the logic of this function happens. So we can write console.log hello. And so now when we run this function, this will happen. So the way you would go about running this function is you do something which is calling the function. So you write the function name and then the parentheses. And so the way I kind of remember it is that, when you cup your hands together over your mouth and you're kind of like calling someone, it's like kind of like the same thing with the two, parentheses. You're calling a function. So that's how I like to remember it. So when we run this code, it's going to console.log hello. We've declared our function, and we want this to happen inside of it, and then we are running the function. Another thing you can do is add values to functions, kind of like placeholders. So let's say we wanted our function to be a function that kind of like does addition. We can have num1 to define first number and num2 to define second number, and these are called parameters. So when we're calling our function, we can fill these out. So for example, we can have number 1 here, and I don't know, 6 here, and then here what we can do is have, we can do whatever we want with these two values, even though we don't know what they are until the function is called. So we could do something like we could write like what num1 plus num2 equals. And if you didn't want to declare a variable or do anything like that inside of here, and you just wanted to return the value that this would give you, but you don't want to console.log you don't want it, that you just want that value to be returned, you can write return and then whatever, like num1 plus num2. So now when I run this function, it's gonna give me 7, even though I didn't console.log it. But the thing is, we're not doing anything with this return value, right? So even though this is being returned, we're not going to be able to see it because, well, we're not really looking at it. So return essentially allows you to give a value back. So for example, if I were going to say something like, this is a function and it's returning this value, right? It's returning number 1 plus number 2. I could set this function equal, like I can set a variable equal to me calling the function. So I can have like const, added numbers, or my bad, added numbers equals this. And now if I wanted to, I can console.log that variable. There we go, some autocomplete. And so now if I run that, it will give me 7 because, 6 plus 1 is equal to 7. So yeah, that's kind of how, why return is useful. Also, if you have multi-line return statements, you just put a pair of parentheses around them, and it looks something like this. Yeah, so next thing inside of functions would be how scope works. Scope is a very important concept in JavaScript. Basically what it means is that you can only use things like variables where they're declared. So for example, if I made a variable like let number equal 2, I have made this variable global. It's not inside of any function, it's just in the actual file. It's the whole file. Now if I want to play around with this, I can really mess with this number anywhere. I can change this number inside my function. I can change it inside of an if else statement. I can do whatever I want with it, wherever I want. But if I were to make a number, another variable, we'll call word equal to hello, I can only do things to this variable inside of the function. In fact, I can't even, console.log it outside of my function. So if I try to do that, it's gonna give me an error, I'm pretty sure. Let's try that out. There we go. Word is not defined. And the reason word isn't defined is because it's not, global. It's only inside this function. So if I took this console.log and I moved it inside of my logger function, this should run perfectly. It'll log word. Oh, sorry, 1 second. Why is it not doing that? Let's think about this for a second. Okay, the reason it's not doing this is because functions kind of run like straight through, right? So it didn't know what word was, so it couldn't kind of, console.log it. So what we can do instead is return word. but there's no need to do that. The whole point here is just to tell you guys that, there is different scope, that you can't really interact with things inside and outside of their scope. So right now, the scope of this variable is inside of this function. You can't interact with it at all outside of this function. Anything declared globally can be interacted inside of a function, outside of a function, anything. Anyways, that is functions. That kind of goes over, basically what a function is, how it works, all that stuff. The next thing we get into is arrays. So, arrays are kind of another way to hold data. So as you can see right here, I've already made a little array. So I can go ahead and show you how they work. So let's say I want to make, I want to have like a group of numbers. So I can call this numbers, and we set it equal to these square brackets. And so similar to kind of how a variable works, a variable stores a value which is of a certain data type, right? Like a string, a Boolean, whatever. So what an array does is it stores multiple values, and they work based off of indexes. So I can have, I can store 1 in here, and then let's say I want to store 2 as well. I would just add a comma, and then 2. I want to store 3, 4, 5, let's say I want to store 5, okay? So I have numbers 1 through 5 stored in this. Maybe let's say I wanted to change this up. Maybe I want to do strings instead, and I want to have fruits. I'll have an orange. I'll have maybe an apple. A banana, I guess, would also work. And then, oh my god, excuse my horrible spelling. Let's just go with an orange. An orange, and then maybe pineapple. And then lastly, let's close off with a watermelon. And then let's close that array off. So I have an array filled with 5 fruits. And now what I can do is kind of, use this data in really nice ways. So what I can do now is, let's say I wanted to add another fruit later on. There are different commands such as, different functions, such as push, which basically pushes another item onto this array at the end. There is pop, which essentially pops an item off the end, so watermelon would be taken off. And there's multiple more, and you have to write, like, how you call a function. It's the same thing. You would write fruits dot pop, and then dot pop is like this in the function way. You're calling the dot pop function on your array of fruits. So after that, there's also, other things you can do. Like, let's just console.log this, right? Let's try that out. So, it logged out every single value in the array. So let's say I wanted to only log out orange. What we could do is we could add a pair of square brackets and write 0. And so the way it basically works is every value in an array has a index. So the first thing in an array has an index of 0, then apple has 1, 2, 3, and 4. Indexes, in most programming languages for arrays or, whatever, always start from 0. So, orange has an array, an index of 0. So if I go ahead and, log this out, boom, I get orange. Let's say I did, 4. So I'll just edit that. So 4. And now I ran my app again. This time I got watermelon, because what's at index 4? Let's count it out. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Watermelon. So that kind of allows you to really play around a lot with arrays. I think one of the best things about arrays in JavaScript is that they don't have to be all of one data type, right? So, like all 5 of our values, are of the string data type, right? But let's say, I want to mess this array up a little bit. Maybe I want to have a number. Maybe I don't want pineapple anymore. Instead, I'm gonna put false here. This gives us a lot of flexibility. So now if we go ahead and do the same thing, and console.log maybe the third array, which is false, the third index, sorry. We'll get false, and this array still works. There's a lot of languages where this doesn't happen, where arrays kind of have to be of one data type, and that's because they also have, like, I think, tuples. But in JavaScript, arrays can be of literally, like, array values can be of any data type. They don't have to be the same data type. And I have just realized that I have orange twice here. Anyways, that is kind of arrays and how they work. There's a lot of flexibility. There's a lot of things you could do. I would recommend checking out the MDN docs to look at more methods like push and pop. There's also shift and other ones. There's a bunch. There's also ways to put things onto arrays. So actually, one more thing about arrays. As I was talking about before, how you can add values. With push, you would have there's a parameter to this function, which is whatever you want to push. So let's say I want to push mango. I want to do a fruit. Well then, it's going to get pushed, and I can console.log fruits to take a look at what it looks like after that. And if we take a look, boom, mango has been added to this array as a 6th value. We could also go ahead and print out, the value based off index. So we know that's going to be the 6th item added at index 5. And because it's already going to be pushed out, pushed in, sorry, this should work, and it should show us mango. So, oh, sorry, my bad. Oh, sorry, that is my bad. Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, here we go. Oh, 1 second. There we go, mango. So, that works out too. But yeah, so this really should just show you how flexible arrays are, and this is really just another way to store your data, that allows you to kind of group it in a different way. But yeah, that is all for arrays. Okay, guys, next thing to get into is objects. So the way objects work is they're kind of another way to store data, similar to arrays. So we have variables, we have arrays, and we have objects. So I'm gonna delete all this right here. I'm gonna leave this array up though, kind of like a point of reference. So as we discussed with arrays, they work through indexes, right? Um, Objects, the way they work is through a key value pair. So, what we'll do is we'll create an object. We can use const for this one. We're not going to change it or anything. So actually, we'll use let. So you have let, and then we're going to call this object person. And objects need to be in curly braces. So, as I said before, the way objects work is they're in key value pairs. So, what you need to do basically is have a key for what you need, what type of data you need. So, let's say I need a name, specifically, I guess, a first name. Is that right? Yep, first name. And then I need not a second name, a last name. Maybe an age. So let me get rid of that. First name, last name, age, and I guess we'll do gender as well. Okay, there we go. So, sorry about that. My computer's just being slow because they're recording at the same time. Anyways, so we have first name, last name, age, gender. So now what we can do is assign these values. So we'll have, of course, colon, and then first name can be John, and you can put the colon, I'm pretty sure, with a space. So like you can have it like this. It's really up to you how you want to do it. I just like to keep mine like this. Oh, yeah, I just like to keep mine like this. And I deleted the E off last name. Let me just fix that really quickly. And so now we have a first name value declared for a person, and it is John. So now if I want to go ahead and add another one, the reason we have this like underlines because we need to have a comma to kind of indicate this is a new value. So we'll have last name, and we'll set this equal to Doe, so John Doe. Same thing again, we need to have a comma, so I can just add that really quickly, and we need to have an age. The age is going to be, I don't know, 23, another comma, and now lastly we have gender. So, we're gonna set this to male, because, John Doe is probably male. And you can also have other data types like we put strings and numbers. You can also have booleans. Anyways, this is an object. We just declared an object. Now what we can do with this is a bunch of cool stuff. We can go ahead and console.log the object, just like you would with an array. We can change specific values. So the way you would do that, and the way you would access specific values of an object would be something like this. First, we have to have our object name, so person, and then we did the same thing with arrays. We had fruit, and then we had the square brackets, and then we put the index in, right? In this case, we're gonna have dot to kind of be like, okay, we want person, and inside of person we want whatever key. So in this case, I want the first name key. I want to know what the value is. And also just to connect everything together, if you didn't already realize, when I was saying key value pair, I was talking about like every single object here. Like, for example, in the first name, the key is first name and the value is John. Last name, the key is for last name and the value is no. Very simple. So here what I'm doing is basically console.logging the person's first name value. So if I went ahead and ran this, it should give me John. There we go. So we can do a bunch of stuff with this. We can change this. We can also edit this value. So let's say I wanted to change this to something else. I could do person dot first name. Oh, sorry about that. Person dot first name is equal to Mark. And we need to have quotes around that because we're not setting it to a variable mark, we're setting it to the string mark. And now we can go ahead and console.log this. So console.log, let's console.log person as a whole, the whole thing, just so I can show you that. There we go, Mark. And if we want to access that specific first name property, as I did before, dot first name. And now if I give that a shot, boom, Mark. So that's kind of how objects work. There are other things as well that you can do with objects in terms of, you can really play around with how you want to structure them. There's also a lot to do with things like when you receive data in JavaScript. You can do a lot of things there as well. Another actually really interesting thing you can do with objects is you can have a function as the value of one of these. So let's say I wanted to have another value here, and I can call this greeting, and let me just fix that. Sorry, my indenting got weird out there. Okay, here we are. And what we can, sorry about that, what we can do is we can have a full function. So because, this is inside of a key, this is going to be a nameless function. So it's going to be looking like this. We're going to have function, and then we're just going to have the parentheses, and then the brackets to kind of, and then we can write our function. There's another way you can write this function. There's another type of function called a arrow function or a fat arrow function that we didn't discuss yet. The way that works is you just have parentheses, and then a fat arrow with the equals, and then brackets like this if you're on 2 lines, or no brackets if you're just on 1 line. But yeah, that's kind of a fat arrow function if you want to try that out. It's really up to you how you want to go about this, but there are multiple different types of functions. Anyways, we'll just use the fat arrow function for this, just so you can get better acquainted with it. It's really the exact same thing. In here you can put down your parameters if you have any, and yeah, same thing. Anyways, so let's say for this greeting function we want to have like a full-on, we want to have something get logged out to the console. So we can do something like this, like console.log, hello, my name is, and then actually I just realized this is a string, so we'll have these, quotation marks, and then, we need to attach the first name property to the string, so we can do plus, person.firstname. And what happens here is it adds these two without any space in between, so we can add a space right here, and that'll fix that. So hello, my name is person.firstname. I am can be a second string. I am blank years old. Person.age, I guess, right? So person.age. And then we can write something like, so hello, my name is person.firstname. And we need to add a space here as well, because it's just going to add it straight on. So hello, my name is person.firstname. I am person.age. And then, yeah, we can just end it off here. I think this is enough. And now we can call this function. So we can do person.greeting. And as far as I remember, we can actually call it like this. So if we give this a shot, I might get an error. Oh, yeah, that's how you call it. So there we go. Hello, my name is Mark. I am 23 years old, but we didn't add that. But yeah, that's how this would work. And so let's say I wanted to put in some parameters here. Maybe like, if you really want to do this, it makes no sense, but I can throw these in, like throw in first name and age. And instead of having to put them in how they are right now, it could just be like this. So first name and age, and then in here I can throw in the first name and age from here. So person dot first name and age. And so now if I give this a shot, it'll do the same thing. Oh, it gave me an error. Oh, I have to write person dot age. My bad. You guys probably noticed that before I did. Person dot age. And now if I load that up, hello, my name is Mark. I am 23. So yep, that's kind of just how that's kind of how objects work. Yeah, that really covers mostly everything about objects. Um, you know, as a whole, you can do a lot of different things with objects. And they can really help you store your data in a very unique way. Objects are also really important to know for when you want to interact with APIs, because that's kind of how JSON is formatted. It's in a very object structure, and so when you want to use APIs and communicate with that data, it's going to be very important that you know how objects work, so you can kind of work with them. So yeah, we've kind of covered a lot of JavaScript right now. This is most of the important stuff. There's one concept we didn't have time to cover that's kind of important, which is loops. But there are ways to get around without having to use loops. There's also other stuff we didn't get to cover, other than loops, mostly related with the DOM. But this should kind of help you transition into JavaScript if you're coming from another language, or if this is your first time looking at JavaScript stuff. This should really help you kind of understand what JavaScript is all about, and how it really works and stuff. If you do have any questions or suggestions, leave them in the comments below. I'd love to take a look at them. And yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. It means so much to me. And like the video so it can get out there to more people. And yeah, that's really all. So if you enjoyed, please do that. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.